Hello, everybody. I just want to make a video. I'm going to be in two or three places, I guess. But I'm going to start out with Psalms 19:14 that says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer." Uh, the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart. I know Jesus prayed in the garden. He went off to himself different times because it's so good to be alone with God in your thoughts. Um, this is my office. It's like, to me, it's like my laboratory. I'm in here by myself. I can think. It's hard to meditate, especially in today's day, because people can, you can be going down the road thinking about God in a car, and you see a billboard with an advertisement, and then your mind will go on that. Uh, you could be sitting reading the Bible, somebody send you an email, you look at it, and next thing you know, your mind's in 20 different places. So we need periods of meditation and to be alone. Uh, Sometimes, a lot of times, most times, God talks to me 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because that's the only time He can get me still. And I asked my wife, I said, "Does He not want to talk at 9, reckon?" But I told the Lord, I said, "Lord, you free to dial me up anytime." I'm gonna read in Mark 15, 1 through 5, uh, and that's one of my favorite books. And it says, "And straightway in the morning, the chief priests had a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, Art thou the king of the Jews? And he answering said unto him, Thou sayest it. And the chief priests accused him of many things, but he answered nothing." That's so amazing. And Pilate asked him again, saying, Answerest thou not nothing? Answerest thou nothing? Behold, how many things they witness against thee. But Jesus yet answered nothing, so that Pilate marveled. Uh, Titus 3:9 says, "But avoid foolish questions and genealogies and contentions and strivings about the law, for they are unprofitable and vain." Uh, God don't want us to answer silly people. Um, just a no answer is the best answer a whole lot of times. Colossians 2:8 says, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit, after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ." Spoil you. They'll just render you of no effect if you let them. I knew somebody, he went on a hunting trip, and they were of the northern brogue. They spoke different terms than we did, and he had ham and whatever else, country ham. He took a bite of it, and he pushed his plate away, and he said, "It's ruined." And the waitress said, "Excuse me?" And he said, "It's ruined." And she couldn't get it. So one of the men that was there at the table with him said, "He's saying it's ruined." That's what'll happen to you if you let people take you over with their philosophy. Just don't give them a platform. If you ignore something, it'll go away. I'm going to read in Exodus 14:10 through 13. "And Pharaoh drew nigh. Children of Israel lifted up their eyes. And behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid." I've handled this in another video already. "And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, and they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show you this today. For the Egyptians which you have seen today, you will see them again no more. Stand still." Psalms 46:10 said, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the heathen. I will be exalted in the earth." I told you the story about my grandson. I would keep him. He would get his shoes off, and I'd say, "Let's put your shoes on before your mother comes and picks you up." But he was wiggling that little foot. I couldn't get them on him, but if I could ever get that foot still, I could easily get those shoes on him. Same way with our minds. We're just a wiggling, and God is trying to get a still mind on us, and we have to get this one still before he can get a new mind on us. I can't sleep if I'm not still and quiet. There's a stillness that lets God work for us. In times of helplessness, we acknowledge that we have done all we know to do. The old people used to say, the old folks used to say, when you can't go forward and you can't go backwards and you can't go to the left and you can't go to the right, just stand still and mark time until God shows you what to do. It looked like God had led Moses into a trap. It'll be times when it would feel like that God has not led us in the right way and we're going into a trap. Traps are terrible. Animals will chew their feet off to get out of a trap. Mice, they get in these little snap traps and they look at you so pitiful, and I don't know what they're thinking, but maybe you keep the cheese, mister, just let me out of this trap. He wants the cheese until he gets his leg in there or some part of his body, and that's the way we are with things. We want that thing until we get in that trap. There were mountains on his left and mountains on his right. The Red Sea was before him. The Egypts in their chariots were behind him. And to make things worse, he had a hostile crowd on his hands. That's what makes it bad. It's when your people are panicking. Not the enemy is saying stuff, but your people are panicking. They probably said, don't you know there's no bridge across the Red Sea? There's not even a foot log. There's no way out. We are trapped. And that's the way it is today. Sometimes we find ourselves in a hostile, restless crowd. They want answers before God has given the answer to us, to me. It's difficult to put in words a divine vision. Not only will God fight your battles for you, he'll give you the spoils of the fight. He said 13 times in the Old Testament books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, they are told to stand still because God works and speaks in stillness. Sometimes you just have to make the best of a bad situation. Stillness is not only a position, but it's also an attitude. What profit is it for a man or woman to be sitting still, but their mind is still racing all over the place? That's the way it is in church sometimes. We might get people still for a little while, but it's hard to get their mind still and focused. Your mind must be still in order to talk to God. The fire was, I was thinking about the 3 Hebrew children being thrown into the fire, and the fire was hot. We know that because when they threw them in, the people that threw them in perished when they opened the door. You have to know how to act when you're in the fire. A Christian knows how to act when they are in the fire. If you go to work and you're about everything and lose your stillness, then you're not any better than the world. When somebody asks you how you're doing, you ought to say fine. I had a little spell when I had 7 months of those radiation burns. People would say, how you doing? And I'd say, I'm hanging in. I'm hanging on. I hated those answers I was given. But now, before that happened, somebody said, how was I doing? I'd say, let's talk about how you're doing. It wasn't really important. And I didn't want to be griping about things. But now I'm back to where I can tell you I'm doing fine. I remember in the Army, I was in a holding company once waiting on orders, and they would come down in a deuce and a half, and they would take us different places. We loaded mattresses. We did this, that, and the other. But this day, they took us out to clear brush. They gave us axe, I don't know what all different kind of equipment to clear that brush out. And we got off the deuce and a half, and there was about 10 of us, but they started producing their profiles, which meant they were limited in what they could do. They couldn't stoop, they couldn't pull, they couldn't lift, and so it was only about 2 or 3 of us out of 10 that could work. So when we go to church, do you flip out your profile? Some people, you ask them how they're doing, they flip that list out, and it just keeps going on and on. And no doubt that if you're like me, sometimes I think, I'm going to try to remember this and just not ask so much how they're doing. When Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, God took the lion's appetite. God knows all about lions. He made lions. In order for you to fully rely on God, you have to be sure that God is able to deliver. You have to know and believe that God will keep His word. You can't know that by doing that. You can't know that by doing what Mom and Daddy says. You have to know this for yourself. God, I serve, is trustworthy. You can depend on Him. Hallowed be His name. There's nothing against His name. The way you can see if God is trustworthy is you can check His record. He's never lost a battle. When Moses stood still at the Red Sea, that's one for God. When Joshua stood still and the Jordan divided, that's 2 for God. When Martha ran out to meet Jesus, when Lazarus died, and Mary waited in the house, knowing everything would be all right. There's power in holding your peace. There's power in being still. I can't come to tell you that there's power in stillness. Some people mistake meekness as weakness, but there was not a meeker man than Moses. Meekness is not weakness. And I aspire to be a meek man because there's strength in it. And he said, if a man's ways please the Lord, He maketh even his enemies to be at peace. I've enjoyed this talking this to you today. Hope you're doing good. If you need anything, let me know. Until the next time, may God bless you is my prayer.